either 19 or 20, I overdosed and almost lost my life. This depression and this anxiety and these bipolar symptoms lying to me and telling me that was the option. The scary thing was like, okay, they can't just make this go away and fix it. But I've learned, as I say, and I named my book, I've learned to use it, to repurpose it and use it as my superpower.
Hi, I'm Kyle Kittleson with MedCircle. Thanks for being here on our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I appreciate it. Today's interview is with AJ Mendez, an incredible woman. We have a lot of fun in the interview. She is a former professional wrestler for the WWE. She also is an ambassador for NAMI and author of the book, Crazy Is My Superpower. She's also living with bipolar disorder and shares what's worked for her, what led to her getting her diagnosis, and some of her favorite self-care strategies. And I do want to put a trigger warning on this video that there will be some discussion around self-harm and suicidal thoughts. Please enjoy this interview with AJ Mendez. Hi, AJ. Thank you for coming on MedCircle.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, as someone living with bipolar disorder, I would love to hear from you what those symptoms actually can feel like.
When I had like my first onset of symptoms, I think I was around, gosh, it may have been like 10 years old. I was very, very young and I didn't know how to understand them. So my first recollection of what they were very extreme anxiety that was a little debilitating at times, stomach aches, like ulcer pain. I couldn't look people in the eye. That was my manic symptoms were very, would manifest in anxiety. That was very uncontrollable. My depressive symptoms were a lot of lethargy, couldn't get out of bed sometimes. I always describe it as like an invisible cloak of iron would lay atop me, and I just physically could not get myself out of bed. Mm-hmm. And a deep sorrow, like very similar to grief. This like loss that I didn't know how to pinpoint. And so feeling these things very young for a very long time. I got my diagnosis when I was closer to 20. So a decade of not understanding what that was.
So that is all in high school.
Yeah. You're dealing with that. When you're dealing with so many other things and so many other trials and tribulations and emotional upheaval and trying to find yourself, to add that on top of it was, I wasn't sure what was just normal kid stuff and what was my brain kind of telling me something needed attention.
Did you bring it to any adults in your life?
No. You know, the thing about my family is that we grew up really hard and there wasn't a lot of time to complain about stuff.
Oh, so you're the one then. Yeah. Sounds like some other families I know out there.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, we grew up in extreme poverty, homeless for a really long time, living in motels, living in people's garages, any kind stranger that would kind of take us in. And so to complain about something that wasn't hunger or, you just didn't complain. That was a luxury, was to voice pain. And you kind of just had to have a stiff upper lip and move along. So I always thought if this is something inside of me, it must not be that bad because my external pain is way worse. And so I really never paid attention to it and never spoke up about it until it was almost too late.
And what happened when you were 20?
So around 19 or to 20, I never want to look back to, into like records, but either 19 or 20, I overdosed. And almost lost my life. And what I didn't realize was I was trying to die by suicide. I didn't care about living anymore. I didn't want to feel pain anymore. And it wasn't an emotional, dramatic movie scene. It was practical. It was cold and planned and calculated. And it was just, I have pain. I want to make it stop. And my brain was it was my bipolar symptoms. It was this depression and this anxiety and these bipolar symptoms lying to me and telling me that was the option.
Yeah.
I've since become very good and very skilled at knowing that voice. That voice is, I call it the dark voice. She has a name. She's a different person. And I don't listen to her.
Wait, what's her name?
Her name is Jean.
Jean.
Because my AJ stands for April Jeanette. So she's Jean. She's the middle name. And you know what? She's kind of a jerk sometimes.
Yeah.
But I got to keep her in check. And
yes.
That suicidal ideation is her just kind of messing with me. But yeah, so that is what happened. I was lucky enough to survive and eventually get a proper diagnosis. And that was the beginning of my life.
I've talked to a handful of people living with bipolar disorder, and substance abuse or addiction seem to co-occur at a higher rate than other mental health conditions. They've told me that it's because their drug of choice was the first time they were able to feel, quote, normal, because they have had these manic or depressive symptoms their entire life, and they couldn't find any other way to treat it. Do you think your substance use, or this in particular, was due to a whole conglomeration of things, or more specifically the bipolar?
So it wasn't substance use. I actually don't do drugs or drink alcohol. I was prescribed prescription painkillers for I had broke my foot in wrestling, and I just decided I didn't even use them because I was like so afraid to use them for the pain. And then one day it was, well, I'll use them now, and just took the whole bottle. Wow. And so that was why it was such a strange thing for me to think that was an option. I will say that addiction does run in my family, and so it's been something I've been very cognizant of and worried about. But it manifests in different ways for me. I can be very addictive when it comes to shopping for like little things. Like I used to be very dangerous online shopping, or food. I was very addicted to food. My weight goes up and down when I get depressed because that is how I comfort myself. It's such a food addiction. I developed a really bad OCD where I had to like touch the corners of everything in the room. Like that was my addictive behavior. And I've definitely been able to reel that in now, but I'm very aware of the substance abuse issues, and that is something I feel like I do have to fight and stay on top of all the time.
When your doctor gave you the bipolar diagnosis, what did you think?
So at first I was misdiagnosed with depression, and I think that was a big cause of my spiraling. But I didn't understand what my manic symptoms were. I didn't understand that those were symptoms. I thought it was just like, sometimes I have lots of energy and I can, clean the whole house until my fingers bleed. And I thought it was a good thing. And realizing that it becomes so exhausting that sometimes it throws you into a depression when it's over. It was such a relief to get the bipolar disorder diagnosis because I had more control. And my mother had been diagnosed before me with bipolar disorder. Okay. So it was like a light bulb, like, well, that makes sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
And when I've talked to some people, they go, I was just thrilled to have a diagnosis because now I had a path towards treatment. Other people were terrified of the diagnosis. Where did you fall?
So because I had seen the piece that it brought to my mother to have answers and treatment plan, there was a sense of relief in that. Like, okay, well, now I know this ominous, confusing thing that's been haunting me. I finally know how to fight it.
Yeah.
It's tangible. I can beat it up.
Yeah.
But I was also very aware that it's not just easy there and out. You've got to find the right treatment. You've got to find what formula works for you. It can feel like an uphill battle. And it's not always going to be linear. And that was the hardest lesson to learn. So along the way, the journey is not linear. There are setbacks. You got to keep checking in. You're never just healed from bipolar disorder. I think that was the scary thing. Was like, okay, they can't just make this go away and fix it. But I've learned, as I say, and I named my book, I've learned to use it, to repurpose it and use it as my superpower.
Yeah. Talk more about that, using bipolar disorder as a superpower, or mental health in general, perhaps.
So I believe that having these extremes to my emotion has given me this different perspective on life. I feel like I see the world in a vibrant array of colors. I feel like I believe in the impossible. I have these delusions of grandeur of what I'm capable of in the world. I feel like there's nothing that is impossible because I have these really emotional depths. I'm very empathetic, almost to a fault, where like it can destroy me sometimes, where I can feel other people's pain. But I think that's a really good thing. I'd rather be that way than cold and uncaring. Like I'm an advocate because my bipolar disorder makes me very empathetic, and I just want to help everyone and be like, let's do this together, everybody.
Yeah.
So it is such a gift. I don't think I would be in the entertainment industry. I don't think I would have made it on TV. I don't think I would have had the balls to go for these insane careers. I've had like 3 careers that were dreams of mine as a child. I don't think I would have been brave enough to do it if I wasn't given this boldness because of my bipolar disorder.
I understand that. Well said. What was the first line of treatment after your diagnosis, and how did it go?
So I started in therapy. I think I did counseling first, and we decided on like a medication. I tend to not go super into detail on my cocktail of the combination of holistic and medication and self-care, just because I think that everyone has their own journey. But I will say I've done everything. I love therapy. I love medication. I love anything that's self-care. I love the hippy dippy, like, let's take this route, like I'm into all of it. Like, because it's proactive. You're in control. You're making a choice. Yeah. And there's so much to that gives you that power back that you feel like you lose. So I always tell people to try all of it, see what works for you. Not everyone's path is going to be the same. So find your formula.
The stigma around bipolar disorder is really great. I mean, depression and anxiety in this day and age, I understand there's stigma for both, but I mean, for the most part, people are like, okay, depression, anxiety, I believe that. But man, you come to bipolar, they don't know what it is. They think it's, intense mood swings within 10 minutes.
Right.
Has this misinformation that people have, this stigma that people have, negatively affected you?
Only by my own doing.
Okay.
I think I knew the stigma was out there, and so I hid, and I didn't share my diagnosis, and I didn't want to tell people, and that hurt me because there were instances where I could have gotten help. I could have people that I could have connected to. And I'll tell you, when I realized all this was when I decided to put a book out, and that was kind of me like coming out as bipolar, as living with bipolar disorder. And the second, right before the book came out, I wrote a blog. I was like, I want to tell people, let them know, so it's not just like this like marketing thing. I want to put it out there and let them know. And I wrote this blog about coming out as bipolar, and people that had been in my life for decades reached out and shared that they too were bipolar, or they too struggled with depression, or they had a family member that was struggling, and everyone asked me for help. Everyone just felt, either just shared that they felt less lonely and less isolated in this diagnosis because I was able to say it out loud.
Yeah.
And so that amount of human connection or help that I was able to give people, or acceptance, I've never once had somebody use it at me, use the word crazy or bipolar in a pejorative way, which is what I was so afraid of.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to reclaim the word crazy and use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
But I was depriving myself that connection, that ability to help other people, and who knows how many resources I missed out on. But that we've made up for lost time now.
Yeah. Your book, Crazy Is My Superpower. We will link to that in the description below. You can check that out if you would like. I'm with you, AJ. When I started working with MedCircle, I was doing these interviews, and I said, oh my gosh, that's so crazy in the interview. And then the interview got posted. I'm sure it's online somewhere. And I got a message saying, hey, in the mental health world, we don't use that. We wouldn't say, oh, that's so insane or that's so crazy. And I quickly, adapted my speech, so to speak. Every now and then I make the mistake. We all do, no big deal. But I try to be sensitive to that. But I love the reclaiming of that word, because you know what? Look, I don't even have bipolar disorder. And sometimes I wake up and feel a little crazy. And sometimes that is my superpower too. So I get that, that I love that. I appreciate that, actually.
You. I think it's just so and here's the thing. I wanted to be really respectful, and I went to the biggest nonprofit organizations. I went to NAMI and I went to the Jed Foundation before the book came out. And I said, what's the proper messaging? I know people are this is going to rub people the wrong way, this title. I want to get the messaging right when I'm out there marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I started. I became an ambassador with them so we can get the messaging right. And people could understand my intention. And my intention behind it is every single thing I've been called in my life. I was a homeless street trash to people. And people called me poor and ugly and tiny and scrawny and loud, crazy. All of those things I weaponized. I used as armor, and I used as my powers to make me successful.
Yeah.
I was successful in my previous career wrestling because I was tiny and loud and scrappy and I didn't look as pretty as the other girls. Like, that was my gimmick. That's what got me successful.
Yeah.
And so it has been my power to have these things that people use as pejorative terms too. Yeah. And so crazy. I just want people to know that we can't change other people's minds. We can't change their lexicon and their language. So just use it, turn it around, and embrace it.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Big thing with those that I talk to who are living with bipolar disorder is they go, I'll tell my friends, my partner, my family, I'm very open and all of that, but I will not share it in the workplace. Mm-hmm. I am afraid that if I share it at work, my coworkers will not trust me. And in the worst case, I may get fired because of it. You are the opposite. You wrote a whole book about it. So how has it impacted your work life?
So it's interesting. I wrote the book after I retired from wrestling. And a huge part of that was being very afraid to feel like I was going to be an unreliable employee if people knew about this. Mm-hmm. Especially just the demand and the schedule. I was just so afraid to let the world know. And what I've realized is that it has cracked open a world of opportunity for me. Like, I have a second career as a keynote speaker because I came out as bipolar. It gave me a career. There are organizations now. I'm in the film and television industry now, and people embrace it so much. And if there are people that don't, I don't want them. I don't want to work with those people. But the world is really growing, and just to see corporations that are so big really embrace the mental health message. I just did a speech with EA Games, my second speech. This is a big, massive corporation that's providing free mental health discussions and speeches to their employees. Like, that's huge. Mm-hmm. I never would have thought I would see a world like that 10 years ago. So the world is evolving. And if people aren't there, I don't want to work with them.
Right. Yeah. There are people who go, well, that's great, but I'm not going to write a book. I'm not going to be a keynote speaker. I just need to go to my 9-to-5 job. And I would like to tell everybody that I'm struggling with bipolar disorder, or I'm a fully functioning, treated person with bipolar disorder, but you should know because I want to show up fully myself in the workplace. I go back and forth, AJ, where I go, look, I think it's great. You should come out if that's what you want to do. But if you want to keep that private to yourself, I also think that is a fine option. Yeah. Where are your thoughts on that?
So I feel I understand like both points of view. I think it's kind of two-pronged. One is there's policy work, right? We can be advocates and like the messaging kind of aspect of it, but there are advocates working very hard in the public policy sphere of how do we incorporate mental health time off, paid leave? How do we incorporate that as a physical illness? And I think there's a lot of companies that are growing. So one answer to that is we in the mental health advocacy field need to attack that, right? So every single corporation gives that option to their employees. to be treated, to have time off and still get paid for it. The other side of that is I'm a really private person. Like, I don't talk about my husband. I don't talk about my home. I barely show pictures of my home. But then I'll go and write a book where it's like, here's how, I almost died.
Yeah.
So I'm very open when I feel like I can serve a purpose.
Yeah.
If you are and because I have a lot of followers, and if I got a lot of people listening to me, I better say something worthwhile. If you are not in a position where you need to do that, take care of you first. Like, everybody needs to know your business. And if it protects you and you feel safer keeping that to you and your family, go for it. But I hope that your workplace has some place that you can go to, HR or whatever it is, where when you need the time off, you are able to get that.
Yeah.
And if not, like, let's start a riot, because we need to take care of employees in that way.
Are your self-care strategies today something you rely on outside of therapy and medication?
Definitely.
Okay.
There's different kinds of self-care, right? Like, there's like the Instagram, like I put a face mask on and I take a bubble bath. And
by the way, that's my favorite type of self-care. Okay. A bath and a face mask. Oh my gosh. That is heaven. Heaven.
I mean, and it's proper self-care.
Yeah.
But self-care we don't think about, like eat the cookie if you want the cookie. Self-care. Say no. I can't remember who said this quote. I feel like I should just attribute everything to Oprah, but no is a full sentence.
No is a complete sentence. Yep.
Like, if that is self-care, to tell someone you do not have the brain power, the bandwidth, the time, you're putting yourself first.
Hey, and y'all, that is a big one. I'm telling you, when I used to be an animal trainer, okay? And so now I get every week someone wants me to help them with their dog or this rescue they just got or whatever. And look, I think it's great you got a new rescue, but I can't train everyone's rescue. So I now just go, nope, I can't do that. And I used to give a whole speech. I was like, today, I hope I can show you over the next hour why I can't train your dog. Like, I made it a whole production. And y'all, and I heard it from Oprah too, AJ. She goes, no is the complete sentence. It's not no, and I wish I could. No, but maybe in the future. No, it's nope, I can't do that.
Yes. Yeah.
Period. Done. And you know what the response is going to be? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Most people are going to be like, okay, cool, got it. Thought I'd ask. It's really great.
It is. And I understand that it's hard. It can be hard, especially hard on women, because we're told to be these caretakers and to be malleable and these lilting flowers that are like, I'm here for you, I can help you. No, like, people are not used to women putting their foot down, and it rubs people the wrong way sometimes, and that's fun.
I work with a team of all women. I'm very used to women putting their foot down, so that's all good. They're all on this call too right now, so hi, ladies. But in terms of self-care, so saying no, eating the cookie, what are those your top ones?
Yeah, I think I used to have a really bad relationship with food. My even like taking my medicine would make me gain weight, and I was on television in a 2-piece, like in booty shorts, for a decade. So that was just something I was very aware of. And now I'm like, I'd rather be alive than have abs. And I figured out a way to have both, and just like really get that right. But doing anything that punishes myself, that throws anxiety onto me, that is so unnecessary, that throws guilt. I feel guilt a lot. That's a huge part of my depressive symptoms, is I will feel guilty for everything. If I can't.
Give me an example of that. Guilty for everything. Like what?
Yeah. Okay. So, so like if like I wasn't as like super like eye contact conversation with like a waitress, or like I'm like, oh my God, I don't want her to like have a bad day, or like, and I'll just think about that for like all day long. I was thinking, oh my God, I hope she didn't think like I was being rude to her, like just stuff like that. Or if I could have said something nicer in a phone call with my family, or I'm sure there's be something from this where I'm like, oh, I didn't respond. I should have like been like asked him a follow-up question about that. Right. Hurting people's feelings, like that's a huge will haunt me. So that's a big thing I need to like let go. But I do that with like with food or spending money, or because I grew up so poor, I'm like, oh my God, do I need that? Yeah. So that happens a lot. So I need to just forgive myself. And food is one of the things I have to be like, just eat the donut. I don't care. I'm
Yeah.
cute with my chubby cheeks.
Yeah. Hey, I read that you were asked if you like donuts or your family more, and you did not answer. So I'd say definitely eat the donut. Yeah. Now, living with bipolar disorder, people think bipolar disorder is bipolar disorder is bipolar disorder. It does exist on a spectrum, and one of the differentiations is bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Are you comfortable sharing where you are in that?
Yeah, I'm bipolar 2. I believe bipolar 1 is more of the delusions and the hospitalization. I can I can understand where the confusion can be for some people, where it takes a bit to figure out where you are.
Mhm.
I am bipolar 2. I don't think one is worse than the other. I think they're very different. We tend to have longer depressive cycles. That's not fun.
Yeah.
But I'm managing it, and I'm at a place where this is the best I've been able to manage it in my life.
And what do you attribute that to?
I think this will sound so like we're in a like a self-care seminar, everybody.
Yeah.
Love yourself.
I
It
can't
really
wait.
is like falling in love with myself.
I
And,
like that. Yeah.
and I think this happens for a lot of people around like age 27. That's when it really started for me. I cared about making everyone else in the world happy, and I was like last on the list. And I realized that you know, to have another Instagram quote up in here, you can't pour from an empty cup. Like, you need to be full and fully charged in your best self to give to people.
Yeah.
Once I started doing that and putting myself first, before anything, I fell in love with myself, and
Yeah.
I forgive myself so much easier, and I give myself so much more grace. And that has translated into, when I feel depressive episodes, I no longer shame myself for wanting to stay in bed all day. I'm like, do it. You need this day. Take it. Take your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that actually makes me bounce back a little bit faster, because I'm not feeling that extra guilt. So I'll wake up the next day and I have a little bit more energy.
Yeah.
Can't do the full workout today? That's fine. Do what you can. Walk on the treadmill. That kind of grace has given me a lot of peace of mind.
Since we're both Oprah fans, she has mentioned that so many times, obviously. And one thing she said that I loved is, somebody said, this is Oprah talking, and she said, you know, someone came up to me and they said, oh, she must be so full of herself, referring to me. And I responded with, I am full of myself. Like, my cup runneth over with me because I love me so much. And another woman I love, RuPaul, is, I mean, he says it at the end of his show every time. If you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? And it is simple and understandable, but where the obstacle is the practice. So you're falling in love with yourself, and that love affair you're having with yourself is able to give you the means to cope with your bipolar disorder in a more strong way. But how do we fall in love with ourselves, AJ? Because so many people, I mean, I'm a big critic of Kyle Kittleson. You know, I know YouTube is too, but no one's a bigger critic than me. And so how do we do that? How did you do that?
For me, I am the type of person that I kind of do everything the worst possible way, and that teaches me the lesson.
You go, so don't do it like this or like this.
Yes. So to you know, go ahead and quote RuPaul again.
Please.
Genius.
Yeah.
What other people think of me is none of my business.
None of their business. Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite quotes of all time. I think that was one of the first things where it was like, to be able to separate other people's opinions of me saying no, of me saying me first, of me being living with bipolar disorder, of me having very strong opinions. I'm kind of a loudmouth. To separate myself from that in real life, in public life, because that's a whole different thing. To separate a persona or whatever I'm willing to give to the world that is separate from me, that has really maintained my mental health a lot. And that has been that was the beginning of I got to do what's best for me. And just putting my needs first, that felt so good. And I was like, oh, like, this is great. And then once you get in tune to what your needs are, then you really just start to love yourself, because it's like, oh, I just needed a break. Oh, I just really wanted to follow this passion. And you forgive your flaws and you realize how helpful they are. Some of these like flaws, right? Like flaws are all like in the eye of the beholder. It's a shift of perspective turns a flaw into a strength. And so just leaning into that and realizing that anything I would have hated about myself actually ended up being a very powerful attribute in my life, led me to really loving myself. And that has made all my other relationships good. That makes my marriage better. That makes my work relationships good. Because I know who I am, and I'm strong in myself.
Fabulous. Really well said. That resonated. That was a lot of actionable takeaways right there, AJ.
Good.
Dr. AJ, I might start calling you. Fabulous. We're releasing this video as we ramp up to World Mental Health Day on October 10th. And we've put a lot of videos on our YouTube channel showcasing different modalities of therapy, both with a doctor and a patient, so people can really see what a therapy session looks like. You've mentioned you're in therapy. So my question for you regarding this is, one, what type of therapy are you in, if you care to share that? And two, what is the best thing that ever came out of a therapy session for you?
For me, it's talk therapy. I'm actually very interested in researching a lot of the other ones and trying them out. Is it cognitive behavioral therapy? That's one
type of talk therapy. Yeah.
Because I think I've got a lot of like PTSD stuff I have to deal with, and I feel like that's more actionable and more like, okay, let's just deal with, like, let's not like talk about it. Let's just deal with it. So I want to incorporate a lot. I just love trying everything, but talk therapy is very helpful because sometimes just saying the words aloud releases it from you.
Huge. Yes.
No longer have to carry the weight alone. And I learned that through writing my book and sharing my story. I felt 10 pounds lighter after I wrote the book.
Oh, I bet.
Oh my gosh. And one of the greatest blessings of my life is now when I do like signings and stuff, it's the first time they're telling their mental health story is to me. And I will
yes.
And I'm like, let's tell me, I can handle it. I can carry this weight. Like that's what I was built on this earth for. So give me that weight.
That's a big privilege for someone to share that with you.
It is. It's one of the greatest honors of my life. And I may not be able to give them like, here's what you do, because I'm not a doctor. I can't safely do that.
No, but you just hold space. That's all you have to do. Hold space. Yeah.
And so that was I would say that was the biggest takeaway, was learning that just releasing the weight of it and not having it be a heavy secret. There's so much weight lifted off of your shoulders. And that made me realize that sometimes people just need to talk. And so I've been able to give that to other people.
And what was the best thing you ever got out of therapy or in a therapy session?
I think that, like, personally though, for me, I think it was realizing that I physically, I was dealing with PTSD symptoms. And there were so many things that I was like, how does this relate to bipolar? And it was like, well, it doesn't. Like that's, like a hypersensitivity to like noise, even like feeling certain things like that. Like insomnia, like I didn't realize was not the bipolar disorder. It was dealing with a lot of like trauma in my life. And so just being able to like, oh, that's why, is such a sense of relief, and makes you feel like it's not all of you. It's just like, oh, it's a little part of me.
Yeah.
That's why that's happening. Okay, put it over here.
Yeah. I like that. AJ, we're going to link to all your social media in the description below and where you can learn more about her. So if you're watching this, why don't you go show her some love? It's all down there in the description. And thank you for being here on our YouTube channel. AJ, I'd like to leave you just with our audience. They are people who are hungry for mental health education, inspiration, and motivation. And as someone with the lived experience of bipolar disorder, you certainly bring that to the table. So what can you leave our viewers with?
So I would like to say that the first step that I can tell you, because I'm not a doctor, is to educate yourself. And if it's someone around you that you're trying to help, just have empathy for them, but also combine that with education. There are so many free resources out there. I would recommend NAMI.org, JedFoundation.org. I've got a list. Hold on. We've got the Trevor Project for LGBTQIA youth. Jed Foundation is for teens and young adults. Childmind.org is for parents and educators, LatinxTherapy.com, BlackMentalHealth.com, AsianMHC.org, WeAreNative.org. I believe in specialized resources. I'm Puerto Rican. I believe in specialized care. We have different needs. Also, please put lifelines in your phone. They're so important either for you or someone else. Save them in your phone. The suicide prevention hotline is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or text home to 741-741. If you're in the USA or Canada, that's the crisis text line. In the UK, it's 85258. In Ireland, it's 50808.
Who's the mental advocate here? AJ, listing out every international resource we got. Thank you.
You never know. Put it in your phone.
Thank you. Put it in your phone. We also have medcircle.com/resources where all of those websites and more are listed. It's an easy place for you to go and grab what is useful to you. I'm also going to have our team put in a link to some of our series on bipolar disorder in this description, so you can check those out if you want to take that first step and get educated on your mental health or the mental health for somebody else. AJ, wonderful to meet you. And thank you so much for being open, honest, vulnerable, and sharing this. I know you are so busy and you have so many projects, and the fact that you prioritize this as one of them just puts a smile on my face. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everybody for watching and listening to my shrill New Jersey voice for the entire interview.
Actually, I have one more question. Okay. Some people just clicked away and they're going to miss it. Here's the question. I'm obsessed with this star-spangled sweater. Where do I want to put that in the link in the bio? Because Bridget, you should wear that. Bridget's our producer. That looks like something Bridget would wear.
Why do I not know? There's an S and an R on the tag.
All right. Well, someone find out what it is and put it in the comments. I want to find that sweater. It's fabulous. AJ, thank you again. And thank you for watching. I'm Kyle Kittleson. Remember, whatever you're going through, you got this.